Well, welcome everybody here in the Beautiful You coaching community. I am super excited to bring a Your Stories Matters conversation to you with Carleen Ross. Carleen is a stress coach that supports her clients in resetting their stresses, allowing them to feel empowered in their own abilities and increasing their ability to bring in more joy. She has a depth of experience in education, being in a holistic field of health for over 27 years. And today, Carleen is here to share her journey of how she has broken generational bondages so her children do not have to suffer through the same pain and neglect that she has faced in her growing up years. I want you to take us through, Carleen, just some of the pain and loss that you've overcome. And well, I'd also love to learn what that light bulb moment was for you when you realized these points of suffering were generational and that you had the opportunity to make a change for the future generations. So, welcome to the Beautiful
Well, thank you.
community.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you and whoever seems to be drawn to hear what I have to say. I just want to thank them for the time that they will allow me and to express my story and hear it in its entirety. I think it's so important when we honor other people's stories because we can find hope and resiliency maybe in our own and just to get some ideas of how to find our own light out of our darknesses. And I think it's so important. So I guess a little bit of a background. So you asked me a couple questions and I had stuff going in my head and all of a sudden it was just like gone. So I have to tell you, like, being a wildlife, being an artist as well too, I easily get distracted. So it's really interesting trying to stay on focus sometimes. So if I get off focus, let me know.
Okay,
And it's funny
I'm
because yeah, a lot of my clients who are very abstract speakers or talkers, they're like, I can't believe you understand me, you follow me. I'm like, hey, I get it from my background. um, so my life, there was a couple of really great questions you asked, and if I miss one, please highlight it again to me. um, my life actually had me live where I thought I was supposed to experience grief. I thought that that was just what I was supposed to see in almost so many situations. And actually, the clarity and the light bulb in some ways came when I was a lot younger. And in a lot of ways, learning the terminology and actually being able to classify what I'm going through didn't come until I was in my 40s, until I was much older. And I was in a good place within my own family that I could do a hindsight check and really come to terms with what was happening. Um, so throughout my life, what I have discovered, so maybe this is how I'll kind of approach it, is how I discovered it from an adult looking back, is I really came into a lot of terms, and the one of my personality types that was so important for me to align with and to really learn about and work with was the personality trait of being a highly sensitive person. That, and identifying with an HSP, all of a sudden I realized that everything that I experienced, all the traumas that I experienced or I felt within my own story made so much sense because it's how I perceived the world around me. So, as a highly sensitive person, a lot of times we will go into situations where everything is almost a threat, where stress is very common for us to experience. And it's simply because we are taking in and processing everything at a deeper level. And what a lot of studies are showing is that those who are highly sensitive, because I need to say that a highly sensitive or an HSP is easily identified in over 100 species. So this isn't just a human trait. This is a trait. And it's those individuals who I classify as that actually alert the rest to the dangers that are coming. So we are the ones that are easily able to pick up maybe what's not right, where issues are possibly going, where something is happening that others aren't aware of. Now, knowing that, when you look back in life, you go, how many times were you blamed for being overreactive? How many times were you minimalized in what you were experiencing or what you were saying or what you were sharing? And then ends up happening is you end up suffering grief and loss and stress from it because no one understands you. no one is listening to what you're saying. And in the end, you go, I was right anyways. Look what happened.
Yes,
Right. So
or
you have
they criticize you, or like, just why are you so sensitive? Like, get over it. Right?
exactly, exactly, exactly. And the reality is our sensitivity is our power.
Mm,
And it's really looking at what a lot of people classified as a weakness that we can look at as actually it is a strength. And what a lot of studies show is that those that are highly sensitive, we have more areas of our brains that are actually being elicited with each and every experience we have than someone who's not. So highly sensitive people make up 20% of the population. Now, knowing that when people, I think it's comical when people are like, I wish I could use more of my brain. I would accomplish so much more. I'd be so much more powerful. And I always look at them now, go, or you'd be more compassionate, or you'd have more empathy. It's using more of our brain. It's like you process things at a different level. So looking back and having that designation, I reevaluate or can revisit my childhood experiences. So my parents were both in abusive relationships through their families' situations. My mother was raised by an alcoholic father. My father was raised by a man and a woman. His biological father and biological mother were both extensively abusive on multiple levels. And what ended up happening is, as much as they thought they left their childhoods behind them, they still brought their ghosts into our situation growing up. So we had generational trauma.
yeah.
I learned behaviors of my parents, what to be fearful without them even saying it, because you pick up on stuff as a child and you have to realize that. Children always know. They always know. And then through that, I had my own traumas that I learned. And what I learned at a young age was to keep it to yourself. Because if you keep it to yourself, things will be much better. It'll go away. And the reality is it doesn't. And as I got older, I learned that this isn't the way to handle your emotions, because they actually just build and store within your muscles, and they come out as different ailments, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, or
Mhm.
spiritual. At a young age, I realized that this wasn't the way it was. In fact, my mother told me once when I was about 19, she said, I learned when you were like 5, I could not tell you what to do because you already had your own path. And if I allowed you the grace to go through it, you were usually right for you. And so at a young age, I knew what was happening was not right, but you just didn't understand to what level it was. And it wasn't until I was older, that I realized I was raised in narcissistic abuse. So that was a huge one for me to wrap my head around, that my childhood experiences were actually abuse. They weren't normal, because so many of us try and normalize what we go through. Um, being an artist, and I was an artist from a child. So it's funny when people go, when did you become an artist? And you're like, well, actually artists are like almost born. We're not created, right? We just are, right? It's how we see the world.
Yeah.
And I always escaped, because if I look at my sisters on how I've come out of my childhood experiences and how they have, we perceive things so differently. Me being an HSP, them not. I focused on certain meanings. So I get really attached to the meaning of what is happening versus the words or maybe the events exactly. It's what they bring or what they're saying to another. I used actually sports and I used my art as ways of taking myself out of the dysfunction, a way of seeing the world a little bit differently and remaining open to it. So I have to be grateful for the personality trait I have, because it allowed me to have the opportunity to see something beyond myself. And with that, I end up working a lot with my clients with hope, because to me, that's hope, is something beyond what you're experiencing right now. And then the difference is of where it becomes an action is you actually figure out ways to acquire that hope, right? Versus just sitting in silence, hoping it'll come to you. You have to be active in your process. As I went on in life, myself personally, I experienced sexual assaults. I've experienced physical ailments, where I had to relook at how I was eating in order to create a healthy body because I was not functioning very well. I've been in car accidents. I've had multiple friends who have died. By the time I was 40, I had already experienced over 12 to 15 of my friends have passed away either from car accidents, suicide, or illness. So I thought I really knew what loss was about. I realize now that I was so wrong. It's like saying you know what being a parent is like until you have a child. You don't get it. And what you realized is, although I had experienced a lot of losses, when you experience that loss that shapes your reality, that relationship that you had that you identify with and now it is gone, you experience loss on a different level. And what I have come to learn through all of my training and my experiences is that we grieve the relationship we had. So if that relationship was very intense for us, whether positive or negative, our grief is going to be just as equally intense. If the relationship wasn't as strong, our loss might not have been as strong with that relationship that is now gone. When I lost my mother died very unexpectedly. Well, in some ways, we knew she was passing away. She had liver disease. We just didn't realize how fast it was coming. So the end of her life was very, very quick. And what had happened is, with a lot of people, I had a very complex relationship with my mom. There were times where she was definitely there for me and other times where I felt abandoned. And in the end, what was really amazing to learn was with her liver disease. With liver disease, as your liver is dying, it produces ammonia in the body. And that ammonia it's a natural byproduct of the decline of the liver. It actually affects the brain. And so a lot of the individuals who have liver disease, they end up becoming, the personality changes because their brain is becoming toxic to the chemicals that are in their body. And when my mother ended up going into hospital, they were able to pump out the ammonia off her body, take it out of her body. And I had my mother back for two weeks. So it was really a blessing to see that I had this woman who I had beautiful memories with come back to me, and then in a way feel robbed in the same way because I only had her for 2 weeks again, right? But that was the turning point for me, to start to really, really analyze as an adult that I needed to go back and revisit. And I started educating myself. I went and I revisited my Bachelor of Science and started building on my psychology degree into becoming a coach, as a health and life coach, so that I could support others with their journeys of whatever that was. I ended up getting trained as a grief recovery methods therapist so that I could support individuals with how to grieve. And the great thing about that is it's not therapy. It's more of an educational program where people can learn about themselves. Because in essence, none of us are broken. We may feel broken, but none of us are broken. We are perfect and whole in our situations. Right. It's just we have to align with ourselves, with someone to show us how to kind of get ourselves out of where we are. While I was learning about the brain, and I actually started really researching PTSD. And I guess I should back up a little bit. I ended up marrying a wonderful man, but he chose to be a police officer. And through that, we ended up dealing with workplace trauma. And so I really wanted to understand my husband better, how the brain works with trauma. And while I was initially picked up that book to learn about him, I ended up learning about my mom, to the point where I'd have to go for long walks while I was reading, because it had me reassess who she was in my life and reassess to realize that she loved me, actually, her 100%, but that was her 100%. It was maybe not what I needed as a child to grow up, but that was all she had.
I love that.
And it was a way to step back, to allow grace and compassion for the woman she was. And then you have to deal with the loss that you held a different space for her while she was alive. And so it's like working through all of these basically shifts and understanding and comprehensions. This is how an HSP's brains work. We go on one avenue and we end up on a totally different pathway into a deeper level of it. And I'm grateful because it's the only way I know how to think. So it's normal for me, for other people.
Yeah, and having that understanding. So I love how you said, even just, the grief process of losing somebody, that maybe you weren't, that you're grieving the relationship. And if the relationship wasn't good when you lost them, then the grief is different for that person than it is for somebody else. And when you said that, I was like, that makes so much sense, because my mom and I did not have a healthy relationship. My last words to her were, I don't give an F if I have a mom. And 2 weeks later, I lost her. And I regret those words, absolutely, because I didn't mean them. I was a selfish teenager and just trying to put my foot down and stand my ground. But when I lost her, I grieved a little bit at the beginning, but I really just stood tall and wanted to be the strength for my siblings. And my older brother, he went into addictions to process and to grieve that way. He was stuck in that place for 22 years. But for me, it took me about 3 years before I actually had that moment of grief. And when you're saying, like, when you had that aha moment, looking back and having that compassion and empathy of knowing that your mom did the best that she possibly could with the cards that she was dealt. That was what my light bulb moment was, with when I was able to walk into that place of grieving her, was that I was wrestling with the Lord. And I'm saying because he was just rescuing me, and I was just starting to build that relationship with him. And I said, God, you said you know the beginning and the middle and the end of my life, and that you love me. If you love me so much, why did you put me with that family? He's like, if not you, then who? And I was like, well, I still don't understand. Like, I need that nurturing. I needed that support, that love, that compassion, and I didn't receive that as a child. So I always felt invisible, unwanted, unloved. And God goes, Stacy, she loved you with everything that she had. And then he reminded me, because my mom shared multiple stories of her trauma, and he reminded me of all that she had gone through. And he goes, how could she have loved you the way you needed to be loved if she never experienced it for herself? And I was like, wow, was that ever a humbling moment for me? And it does, it solidifies your heart to be like, have that compassion. And then my grief opened up like a floodgate for me, because then I felt so guilty that I was demanding something from her that she wasn't capable of giving to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's us looking back, I believe, on our stories to find the power that we gained from it. And they talk about it as traumatic growth. You hear that term a lot with psychology. And the reality is we all gain something from our trials and tribulations. It's just, what is the choice you're going to do with it? And it's realizing that there is a choice. We aren't, the path isn't set out for us. We have multiple almost forks in the road to make choices. Do I want to continue down this way, or do I choose something different? And for me, within my own story, it was choosing something different. I was not raising my kids the way I was raised. I was not going to belittle their emotions. I was not going to allow them freedom to experience. And when I became a mother, I actually realized right away that my kids were here to teach me so much. I just had to look at them as the teacher they were. They were these perfect little angels that society hadn't warped yet. And if I could allow them to remain pure, I was just like, all the lessons I could learn from them, right? So it was immediate for me to realize I was here to protect them and to keep them whole, whatever whole was for them, right? Because we all have our different version of wholeness. And it was really making a lot of strong choices. So I realized later on in my life, all the choices I made without realizing I made them, because they just were who I aligned with, like within myself. They were my own belief systems.
Right.
And because of that, My husband gets baffled because the conversations I have with my kids, because they talk to us. We built relationships on respect. And it wasn't so much I wanted to be their friends or their parent. I wanted to have a respectful relationship, because if we have respect, we can create love that's beyond anything. And to see them as their whole, to the point that, when my kids were little, scrapbooking was really, really huge. So I scrapbooked all their baby years, and I scrapbooked their tantrums. They have a tantrum page, both of them do. And the reason why I did that was because it is almost what others consider our flaws is what makes us unique. They are what sets us apart from other people, and we need to embrace all aspects. So that's like looking at shadow work. That's like looking at the gifts we have. By honoring all aspects of ourselves, we actually make ourselves whole. Whereas when we want to negate or repress a part of ourselves, we end up in stress. We end up with repressed grief and loss. We end up with all of these aspects. And do we make mistakes? Do I make mistakes? For sure.
Yeah,
We're all here. I figure if we have our 2 feet planted on this earth, we are still here to learn. Like there is still stuff that we need to learn. And ultimately, every single day, I try and wake up so that I can live my life. I don't call it in the high road or the low road. I want to be in the middle one. I want to stay in a state of humbleness, where I can just experience the world and work very, very hard to not have judgment on anything.
Right.
And that is it is a place that takes work, right? And it is a place that allows us to be mindful. And mindfulness doesn't mean that we are in a state of awe or we are in a state of bliss all the time. It's to go, whoa, I had a negative thought and I retract that. Let's look at this, and bring yourself back to that state of neutrality. It's just allowing what we experience to happen, but then bring ourselves back to the moment, and bring within it a little sense of awareness. I've always been curious about myself. So for me to dive in deep and look at all my flaws and the ugliness that I may have, I may not like to admit it, but it's there, it's part of it. And if I don't look at it, I can't learn from it. And if I can't look at it and learn from it, I can't grow.
That's right.
And so it's allowing just that space. So I really try and work almost from an artist standpoint with my clients, in that your life is your own masterpiece. And so it's like looking at everything just so that you can become the expert on you.
I love that.
And I look at everything that I have been through and all of the training that I have acquired. And a lot of it wasn't to get ahead. It was out of pure curiosity, just to learn more. Because I'd start on one path and I'd end up on another, and I'd end up on another, and I'd end up on another. And I was a kid who hated school, which is really funny now to look back on my education, because you would never guess that, but I did. I really disliked school as a child. But
And you know what? I have a very similar story with, because I was telling my husband the other day, actually, I was like, I was always stuck in this dream world, always fantasizing a different path or a different life, that the one that I was living isn't normal. And it took me a long time to realize that, because when you're in these toxic environments, your parents end up hanging out with similar type people. So all your surroundings is all toxicity, and you think that that's normal. But then you get a taste of something outside of that circle, and you're like, oh, there is a better way. And then you start wondering, like, how did they get to that place? And how can I get to that place? And then we start exploring. And I love being a scientist of our own lives, because we can learn so much. And just the understanding, and especially being a highly sensitive person, we can often take those circumstances, and we have two ways of actually viewing those circumstances and allowing them to victimize us. And then we fall into that poor me syndrome, and the world owes me something for everything that has happened to me. That's where my mom got stuck. Or we can fall into this, like, no, I can rise above this. I can be victorious. I can become a better version of myself, but how do I do that? And that's when that exploring piece really taps
Yeah.
in, and just kind of looking at those events. Like I hated school too. I never did well in school. I wasn't well supported in school or even at home with homework or anything like that, because I had to take care of a mom with mental health. Like it wasn't an easy task. And then just now coming into this place, I love learning. I love learning all these new things and being able to bring it to the world. And I never ever in my life dreamt that I would be where I am today.
Oh,
So
yes. Well, if you would have told me speaking in front of people, I would have been like, oh no,
oh no. In school,
that's
I
not
would
gonna
like hall pass, I need to go to the bathroom, and I would come back at the end of the class.
work.
Like there would be, I
Yeah.
would, and if I end up having to go in front of the class, I'd be so nervous. I'd be shaking, my hands would sweat. I probably peed a little, like it was bad.
Yeah, it is. It's so funny. I always give an example of when I was younger, I did solo singing, right? And I remember sitting in front of the judges and singing, and they'd be like, you look like you want to run away. And I'd be like, because I want to run away. This is it. Like, you are perceiving it correctly. And it's interesting because I found it was actually through my artwork I started doing inspirational talks. I started using my art and I used it as a way to express that you can become more than other people think of you.
Mm,
And I really do that in the essence that when I was in school, I had a teacher who told me that I couldn't, I wasn't very good at art, and, like just kind of patted me on the head, like, good job, but maybe you should stop, kind of thing. Right. And it
mm,
was really interesting because I'm in world-class shows, internationally recognized, because I chose to not listen to her. I chose to align with something else beyond what she was capable of seeing. And in school, we would have to copy other art that was out there, right? That's how they taught you. So I had chosen Robert Bateman. And for those who may not know him, he is a Canadian wildlife artist and very, very well recognized in North America anyways. And I was copying her work and she thought it was too hard for me. And in the end, I had teachers offering me big money to buy that piece. And what's ironic about that is my art shows with his now. And so I had this teacher who had this belief system, and then I showed her what I was capable of because it was a passion coming from within out of me. And
mm.
you can't judge someone's passion. You can't judge that energy that comes out, to a point that I look back in my life. And I use that example a lot with children and teenagers about doing their best because you don't know who's looking. Because just doing my own work, I am recognized through a lot of the main focus of my main animal of focus is a sea turtle. And a lot of sea turtle organizations know of my work and I don't know them. But it's just, you never know who is recognizing what you were doing. And to always put yourself out in a light that you want to represent who you are and have that align with who you are when no one is looking, so that you are one and the same person at all times.
Right.
Because so many people play a part out in society and a different part when they're by themselves. And that's where a lot of stress occurs because they're not in alignment. It's because it's almost like, what role do I play here? Whereas if you just make it all the same, and sometimes it takes a little bit of work. Those who know me as an artist were like, now you're coaching, now you're doing loss. Oh, you're just so scattered. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. It all aligns. It all aligns and it all works. It's just that you haven't seen the pattern yet, but the pattern's there. Right. So
I love
I,
that, especially in today's world. Love, there's so much expectation for us to be a specific type of individual. And if we don't fall underneath that umbrella, then we're going to be judged or not liked. Or especially if we've experienced any of these traumas in our life, our deepest desires to be liked and loved and acknowledged and respected, and it's so hard for us to play a part that's not genuine to us. We put on that face mask, and I can see that being very torturesome, because you can't keep a facade forever, right? So there's going to be cracks.
yeah. Yeah, it is. It's strength, right? That was one of the biggest lessons I had because being sensitive, I hid my sensitivity. And so when my mother passed away, all those inappropriate walls that I had built crashed down. And then all of a sudden I had to process everything all at once, right? And I had someone in my life tell me that she thought I got stuck. I froze after my mom died. And I looked at her, I said, no, 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 no. I wasn't frozen. I was busy growing roots, I said. And so I use a tree with roots as the image for my business to show that we need to build strong roots in who we are in order to grow tall and strong, right? And I looked at her and I said, no, I was busy. I was really busy. You just couldn't see it. I was just working really hard on me and analyzing, because with my mom's loss came a lot of belief systems. The belief my family held for a role of a woman, the belief of what my mother's life even meant to other people in the family and to me, because we all have meaning on this earth. We all bring meaning with us. And a lot of us minimize what our lives actually mean to others. Yes. And it's just so sad that we can't have live wakes where people can come up and just share what we actually meant to them or mean to them, because so many of us don't express it to one another. They only come out when the person's gone, you know? And I just think we could empower so many people if we could actually share with them what their life means, because that alone could alleviate someone's pain and suffering, because they think no one sees them. But we're all seen. We all are. It's just that's maybe not how we feel at times.
Yeah.
And I think it's just it was just really amazing for me to just be able to look at my experiences from so many different levels. And I love science, and so I totally geek out on science and facts and studies, and I love it when science also aligns with my belief systems, because a lot of times spirituality, religion, whatever you want to call it, like your beliefs, they get minimized by a lot. And when you can actually look at belief systems within spirituality, and the scientists call it this way, and you can go, they're the same thing. Like you are talking about the same thing. You're just using different words. Yes. And it's realizing this is where I get the meaning is there. It doesn't matter what words you use. It's what is the meaning? Because we can say words that have no meaning to us. And so they have no energy. They're lifeless. And we can say words that carry on a life of themselves. So it's just looking at all of it. I'm grateful for the life I had. Never would I have ever thought I would have had someone contact me to be on a program like this. But I'm just grateful for it, that I can have that retrospect on my own life and know that it has it brought me awareness so that I can hold space for someone else and realize that whatever they're going through. So your story with your mother, so different than mine. So I cannot say, if you said I lost your mother, for me to go, oh, I know what that's like. I have no idea. I know what it was like for me. And I can only find out what it was like for you if I ask you. And so there's a lot of ways that we try and support others, but we actually minimize them through it. When individuals will tell me that the way I am with my children is because of the goodness my mom showed me, and I go, well, actually, it's from what she didn't show me. I chose to do something different. And looking at everything with that power of, we have the right to choose. We have the right to choose what we will allow into awareness. We have the right to choose how we will perceive something. We have the right to choose what we will do with our feelings and what's going on in our bodies, right? We have the right to choose to remain where we are. You know, and the pittiness, like we all have the self-pity. I call it the pity party. And I'll tell my husband, I'm having a pity party and I'm putting a timer on, and I will have self-pity for the next 30 minutes. And then when it is done, then I have to regroup, right? It's just the right to choose. And I think that word alone is such a powerful word for people to learn, that there is a choice. And for me, I chose to raise my children differently. I have 2 teenage boys and they are amazing and they teach me so much. And they really taught me, I knew nothing about men. I knew nothing about boys until I raised my 2 boys. And, but we have choices and you get to pick and choose what you want to allow to become your patterns of habit. And you have the right to go, you know what, it's time for me to move past this and know that it'll take some work, but you still have that right. So
this is so good, Carleen. There's just so many nuggets in here, just that the choice factor, the allowing yourself that moment to have a pity party and not feel guilty about it, but knowing that, okay, allocating, I'm going to give myself X amount of time to just wallow in my self-pity and then I can move on, but knowing that you can move on after you've had your little meltdown, frenzy, because we, especially a highly sensitive person, we need to kind of like process all the emotions. And sometimes that is the best place to do it, is when we're having one of those, self-pity moments. I know I've had lots of them in my day. And then I come back and I realize like, I am kind of at fault at this, because sometimes when we fall into that place, we just stand our ground and be like, no, it's all you triggered me, it's all your fault, right? And then we step back and we have that opportunity to reflect and really realize that no, I should have said something a little different. I could have been a little bit more compassionate. I didn't need to receive those words as being harmful to me. That person's intentions were pure. They didn't mean to have that tone, or especially a highly sensitive person, it's a tone or a body language that we're reading that we gravitate to, and will create this whole new narrative in our mind that that person's intentions were not on that path at all, right? I'm not sure if you've had that experience, but I've definitely had those experiences even within my marriage. It's like my husband will say something and his heart is meaning, in the right place, but the way it'll come out, because of some of the stuff I've had to work through and still working through, it's like a trigger, right? It's like, oh my God, he's attacking me, or he doesn't love me, or he just wants to abandon me, or, I fall into that trap sometimes. And I'm like, no, I have to remind myself, he loves me. I am secure, I'm safe, and just remind myself of these things and then reevaluate that scenario so I can have a different lens to look through. So
exactly. Yeah. What you say speaks so much truth. And I think it's realizing that each and every one of us, and I'll share that with my presentation a little bit too. So you'll have a bit of redundancy here, but I think it's important to mention it now, is just that each and every one of us brings our past experiences to each and every moment we share in the moment. So every time we deal with one another, you are never dealing with the same person, because you don't know what conglomerate from their past is in that present person. And knowing that our triggers are unresolved stresses and losses that are coming into the moment, we're bringing them in. And in some ways, they created our pathways and our habitual patterns of dealing with people. And like you said, I've had it with my husband. My husband will give me a look, but it triggers the way my father gave me a look. And that meant this, right? But it's learning to be able to dialogue it sometimes out. So I've gotten to a place with my husband, I'll be like, the look you are giving me is telling me this. Is that what you're intending? It's almost like he's always like, we're always in a psychological discussion, but and sometimes you almost have to be. And I'd be like, okay, because it's triggering the way I was raised. And when we are dealing with individuals who did experience some level of trauma growing up, or traumatic experiences, because trauma lies within us. Trauma is not what happens to us. That was an event. But what happens within us is our trauma, is that we do process things very differently later on, because we are always looking for that self-preservation side of it, right? And we want to avoid it again. But like you said, it's reminding yourself, no, I am safe and secure in this moment. I am okay.
And I think just having that, we're going on 19 years and there's been some really hairy seasons in our marriage, because the communication has not always been there. And over the last number of years, I've really worked hard at trying to use the right words, find the right things to say. And again, just like you said, that look, saying to your husband, like, this look, what did you mean by this look? This is how it made me feel. I do the same thing in conversation when we're walking through stuff in my marriage, is be like, honey, like, I know what you said. I know your intentions are pure, but this is what I heard. Could you please maybe say it in a different way so I can help me understand where your heart's coming from? Because I always have to, we listened to a really great speaker once that said, they interviewed hundreds and hundreds of marriages, really successful ones and not so successful ones. One of the questions they asked some of the ones that they would perceive to be successful marriages, like, what would be your best tip is to anybody out there that wants a successful marriage? And this lady was like, the number one thing is to always know that your spouse, his intentions are pure and that they don't mean harm or ill will towards you. So however things are coming out, it could be they had a stressful day, or someone cut them off, or they popped a tire. There's all these things that are adding to their stress load for the day. They come home and then you're adding all your stress onto them, and just they snap, right? They're human too. And so we have to understand that, there's so many different variables and understandings to someone's path and the journey that they take day by day. And not everything is an attack to us, that we're not always being, getting the bottom end of the stick per se. Right.
Yeah, it is important to know that. And especially when it's in a good marriage, right? When it's in a healthy, when both people are healthy and there for good intentions. I think that's exactly it. Yeah.
Oh, Carleen, this has been so good. So just to share with the members here, if they're looking for somebody to support them through a season of loss, or, they're facing a whole lot of stress in their life, and they're looking for some coaching support, how do they reach out to you if they want to establish to see if you would be the right coach for them? What kind of programs do you offer? Just brag about that a little, just so that the members here know how to get in touch.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on Instagram, and I have a private group on Facebook as well. So I do, I can share those, or they can be links. I'm not too sure how best to
I'll
go.
put the handles here in the video.
Okay.
So they can see them on the screen. So
perfect. And then I do have web space as well. So on my website, I do tell a little bit of my story, give a little bit of background on some of the programs that I offer. I can work with anybody from any time zone, because I can do online sessions as well. So people aren't limited by their demographics of where they live, if they align with who I am, or if they feel that I might be a right fit for them. The programs that I really focus on is I do run the grief recovery method programs. And those are more on an educational based, and they teach tools of how to work through, or maybe reframe how your losses have affected you in your life. These losses can be anywhere from the way you look at your body image. They could be with someone who is living now to someone who has passed away. It could be a loss of a job. Like, really, when we start talking at losses can mean so many things for different people, and we really associate them with death and divorce, and they're not just linked to that. I also work with my coaching, where I do support highly sensitive persons. I bring in different tools because we process things on a different level, and we process them a lot of times emotionally. So we need different tools to work through. So sometimes I find a lot of the tools are very intellectual, and then we need a different level, right? So it's really, I cater a lot of my sessions to the individual I'm working with on how they process the world. And sometimes we discuss, do you think this would be better for you, or this? Okay, let's move to this then, to allow them choice. Because again, I think it's really important that we empower other people to know that they can take care of themselves. And the way I look at my sessions is I'm constantly working myself out of a job, in that I will teach you as much as you can, or coach you or guide you on it, so that you are good and you don't need me. anymore. It's not to create a
Oh,
long forever client coach relationship,
I
which
mean,
is fine.
yeah, it just goes to show that those your clients aren't broken. They just need
That's right.
little bit of support to repair a couple, replace a hose or
Exactly. Like, and some of them call me every once in a while for little check-ins, and we do that because I mean, fundamentally, we build a relationship. So it is different than going for counseling with my sessions, because coaching, I take you from where you are right now and we build you up to where you want to go. So
Mhm.
what is it you want to acquire? Whereas a lot of counseling looks at where you are and they go into the past to heal you, to bring you back to now. And so it's a different perspective on that. So as a coach, we don't really do therapy. We just empower. That's how I like to look at it. It's
Yeah.
really about empowerment. So I offer a lot of different programs. I end up creating new ones as I go, and I always keep them updated on my website. I will be having lots of different types of stress resets programs, whether it's through the senses or it's dealing with relationships. And a lot of it is just reframing who we are in those moments and
Yeah.
how we are, because we can only truly affect ourselves. We can't change anyone else.
No,
So
yeah, I love that good old quote that's like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So if you're
mhm.
always looking outwards to try to fix somebody else in your circle, it's always going to be catastrophic because their path and their journey is personalized to them, their own, right? So the only person that we can affect is ourselves and how we show up within that circle to make a change or a difference. And
Mhm.
that was an aha moment for me, because for years I was always looking at like pointing the blame at my husband because he was always like triggering me. It's all your fault, da 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 da. And then I had to take a step back. I'm like, we keep going around the same mountain over and over and over again. I'm like, maybe I should start looking at my part in this. It's like, it is
Yeah.
humbling to come to that place, but it's empowering when you can recognize those things and then heal and then bring a better version of yourself to the relationship. And then it just flourishes from there, getting those roots deep, right?
That's right. Build those roots. You got to grow them deep into the earth. You got to get that
Yes.
stability.
And then
Yeah.
they can withstand any storm.
Yeah, you betcha.
Oh, good, Carleen. So just quickly, just tell the members here what your website is, just if they're listening to us audibly, they can keep it in their mind's eye.
For sure. So it's carleenross.com. So that's CarleenRoss.com.
I love just keeping it simple, right?
You betcha. You betcha.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Carleen. It has been an honor just to have you come and share your story and just how you've been able to transform that generational bondage. And now you're giving back to the world these tools and resources that you've been able to apply into your own life to find healing and vibrancy in who you were created. So thank you so much for what you're doing and how you're making change in this world. Keep shining your light, sister.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.